The lecture hall looked less like a classroom and more like an arena. Rows of seats rising upward like stadium bleachers, fluorescent lights humming softly above hundreds of restless students. It was Tuesday morning, but the way the tension hung in the air made it feel like exam day. And at the center of it all stood Professor Linda Cartwright. Her heels clicked sharply against the tiled floor, each step slicing through the murmurs of students flipping notebooks and unlocking laptops. She didn't need to yell for silence. Her presence alone demanded it. Serious eyes behind silver-rimmed glasses, sharp jawline, blonde hair tied too tightly, like even her hairstyle respected her authority. Cartwright wasn't just feared on campus. She was known for impossible tests, known for humiliating students who dared speak before thinking. Known for precision, discipline, and a relentless belief that only the elite deserved to be here. Today, she looked even more unforgiving than usual. She reached the front board, snapped a piece of chalk between her fingers without hesitation, and dusted her hands off. The chalk shattered, like it knew it wasn't worthy of her standards. Last lecture, she announced. We covered multivariable limits. Today, we push forward. A pause. Sharp. Intentional. Laplace transforms. The first equation hit the board like gunfire. Long, delicate strokes, forming symbols that looked more like an ancient language than mathematics. The room responded instantly. Papers rustling, keyboards clacking, breaths quickening. But one student didn't move at all. Daniel Reed. Middle row, third seat from the aisle. Hoodie, jeans, calm eyes, a silent storm. While everyone else panicked, Daniel stared at the board as if he were reading a children's book. Numbers never scared him. Equations didn't swallow him whole like they did to others. He was quiet, always quiet. The kind of student you wouldn't notice unless you were looking for him. But his mind was a machine, precise, rapid, and frighteningly clear. He studied the professor's writing, and there it was. A mistake. Small, barely noticeable, but still a mistake. Daniel tapped his pen lightly on his notebook. Should he say something? Should he let it go? Most students never challenged Cartwright, because she didn't tolerate being questioned, not by anyone, and especially not by undergraduates. Before Daniel could decide, someone else beat him to it. A nervous girl in the front row raised her hand. Professor, I think there's an error in the second line. The class froze. Cartwright turned slowly, almost theatrically, arching a brow in disbelief. An error? She repeated, tasting the word like it was something sour. She examined the board for a full 2 seconds, then smirked. There is no error. The girl shrank into her seat. A few students snickered quietly. Daniel's jaw tightened, not at the student, but at the professor's arrogance. Then, without meaning to, Daniel's hand rose. It was instinct, nothing more. Actually, he said calmly, there is an error. Every head turned. Cartwright did not like being corrected. And she definitely didn't like being corrected by a soft-spoken student in a hoodie. Oh, she challenged, enlighten me. Daniel stood, not out of bravado, but because he preferred thinking on his feet. In the second step, he explained, you applied the transformation to the wrong term. The coefficient doesn't carry over that way. Silence. Cartwright's jaw flexed. She looked back at the board, this time more carefully. She saw it. The mistake. Her lips tightened. For a moment, Daniel wondered if she'd just admit it and move on. But Professor Cartwright wasn't that kind of person. Instead, she stepped aside and held out the chalk. Well, Mr. Reed, since you're so confident, why don't you come up here and show us the correct way? The class murmured. She wasn't inviting him. She was challenging him, setting him up to stumble, to hesitate, to fail. Daniel walked to the front, took the chalk from her hand, and began rewriting the equation. His movements were smooth, focused. He spoke while he wrote, calm, nonchalant, like he was explaining the steps to a friend. When he finished, he handed the chalk back. Cartwright's expression didn't move, but her eyes flickered, just once. Enough for Daniel to understand. She hated that he was right. Fine, she said, cold and clipped. You corrected it. Congratulations. No praise, no acknowledgement, just a dismissal. Daniel returned to his seat. But Cartwright wasn't done. Not even close. She wiped the board clean, with a forceful stroke, and wrote a new equation. Twice as long, 3 times as complicated. A monster of integrals, limits, and transformations intertwined. Something no one in that room had ever solved. She finished with a flourish, placed the chalk down, and crossed her arms. Since you have such a keen eye, Mr. Reed, she said, her voice dripping with challenge, solve this. The class gasped. She wasn't testing his knowledge anymore. She was testing his dignity. Daniel inhaled slowly, then stood, walked back to the board, picked up the chalk, and began. He didn't hesitate, didn't panic, didn't stall. His hand moved like water, equations flowing, symbols dancing. Numbers locking into place with precision only someone born for mathematics could possess. Halfway through, the room went dead silent. Even Cartwright wasn't breathing. Daniel's final line snapped into place. He set the chalk down gently and turned. You could hear hearts pounding. One student let out a low whistle. Another whispered, "No way." Cartwright's face was unreadable. Her pride battled her reality. "Lucky guess," she said finally. Daniel raised an eyebrow, but didn't respond, because he didn't need to. The work on the board spoke louder than anything he could ever say. And in that moment, everyone in that room felt it. Today, a quiet student had shaken the throne, and the Queen of Calculus wasn't handling it well. The moment Daniel finished writing on the board, the room sat frozen in disbelief. Students stared at him as if they had just witnessed a miracle or a rebellion, and in a way, they had. Professor Linda Cartwright stepped forward slowly, her heels tapping lightly, as if even the floor hesitated beneath her. She stopped in front of the massive equation Daniel had solved and examined every symbol, every fraction, every transform. Her jaw tightened, her fingers tapped, her pride trembled, because there was no escaping the truth. Daniel wasn't lucky. He was right, again. But instead of accepting defeat like a reasonable person, she changed tactics. She turned to the class, her voice crisp, icy, and theatrically loud. "Mathematics," she announced, "is not about flashes of brilliance. It requires discipline, consistency, and understanding, qualities that many students lack." Her eyes slid toward Daniel. The implication was clear. Daniel didn't flinch, didn't speak, didn't even blink. He just held her stare with quiet composure. She hated that composure. "Let me be clear," she continued. "No single correct answer proves anything. Some students," she emphasized the word, "memorize patterns without truly understanding the underlying structures." Students exchanged glances. Everyone knew what she was doing. She was trying to shrink him, trying to twist the narrative, trying to turn his achievement into an accident. Daniel sat down again, folding his hands on the desk. There was no anger in him, no frustration, just a patient awareness, like someone watching a storm, knowing it will pass. But Professor Cartwright was just getting started. "Since Mr. Reed seems so confident," she said, Let's give him something more appropriate. She walked back to the board, grabbed the chalk, and wrote another problem. This one so long, it wrapped around the edges of the board like tangled vines. A brutal mix of nested integrals, Laplace inversions, a second-order differential transform, and a manipulation rarely tested outside graduate school. Students groaned softly. "Professor, that's—" "Quiet," she snapped. Then she turned, almost smiling. "Mr. Reed, solve it." Daniel inhaled, not in fear, but in thought. Cartwright was no longer testing mathematics. She was testing endurance, confidence, identity. Daniel rose slowly. The chalk felt cold in his hand as he approached the board. For a moment he stared at the tangled equation, letting his mind absorb the structure. It was enormous, yes, but not impossible. It just needed clarity, patience, and perspective. He began writing. The first few steps were deliberate, clean, steady. But every time he finished a line, Cartwright was there behind him, hovering just close enough for him to feel her disapproval burning through the air. "Wrong," she said suddenly. Students gasped. Daniel turned slightly. "Which part?" "That," she said, pointing at nothing specific. "Start again." Daniel studied the line. It wasn't wrong, not even close. But he erased it anyway. Not because she was right, but because he refused to give her the satisfaction of seeing him react emotionally. She stepped back with folded arms, watching him erase perfect work just because she said so. Daniel began again. This time, she interrupted after the second line. Incorrect approach. He paused. Again. Nothing was wrong. She was sabotaging. Trying to rattle him. Trying to embarrass him. Trying to reclaim power. Whispers filled the room. This is messed up. He didn't do anything wrong. She's targeting him. Daniel heard it all, but didn't turn around. He stood at the board, chalk in hand, shoulders steady. Then he did something that shifted the entire room. He placed the chalk down, turned fully toward Cartwright, and said calmly, "Professor, if you'd like me to solve it, let me solve it. Or, if you'd like to prove something, then solve it yourself." The room erupted in a low shockwave of whispers and muffled gasps. Cartwright's face went pale. For the first time in her career, someone had said no to her intimidation. Her lips trembled slightly before forming a thin, cold smile. "You think you're clever," she said. Daniel shook his head. "No, just honest." She stepped closer, lowering her voice so only he and the front row could hear. "You won't last in my class if you keep this attitude." Daniel's eyes didn't waver. "Then I'll last with my work," he replied softly. "Not your approval." Cartwright froze, as if someone had just slapped her with truth she couldn't counter. Before she could reply, a voice from the back broke the silence. "Let him finish." Another voice joined. "Yeah, he's doing fine." Soon half the students were nodding, murmuring agreement. A few people even clapped quietly. Cartwright's authority, her throne, cracked. Daniel turned back to the board. This time, he didn't interrupt. He wrote smoothly, purposefully, each line building on the last, forming the foundation of a solution so elegant that even the uninterested students found themselves staring. The lecture hall was silent. The chalk tapped gently as he finished the last line. He stepped back. Done. Finished. Correct. The board looked like math poetry. Students burst into applause, not loud, but full of respect. Daniel walked calmly back to his seat, but one person wasn't done. Linda Cartwright. She stared at the board, eyes swimming with a mix of anger, disbelief, and something she had never felt in her own class before. P.S.P. Defeat. She erased the board without saying a single word. Then, quietly, she said. Class dismissed. No lecture. No homework. No explanation. She just left. Then, quietly, she said class dismissed. No lecture. No homework. No explanation. She just left. Daniel sat silently as students filed out, some patting his shoulder, others whispering thanks, admiration, disbelief. He didn't smile. He didn't celebrate. He simply breathed. At a critical point in pondering reflection, call back to this. We're wise today, where insider said, "This is it. I was about to give you this, insider's mind." No doubt. Like Wester, ex-e Burse, no yes, no no, partners continued to be his. Mentor said, Yeti, investing content sites, ever evolve. Up, haha, because he knew. This wasn't the end. This was only the beginning of what the professor was planning. When Daniel walked out of the lecture hall, the sun outside felt strangely warm, like the universe was giving him a moment of peace before the storm he didn't yet see approaching. Students passed by him, some smiling, some whispering, some patting him on the back in quiet support. But beneath all those reactions, Daniel sensed something else. Eyes. Someone was watching him. When he turned, he saw Professor Cartwright standing far down the corridor, her arms crossed, her jaw tight, her expression unreadable. She wasn't angry in the loud, obvious way she had been minutes earlier. This was different. Her silence was colder than her insults, more calculated, more dangerous. Daniel met her gaze for a moment, then walked away, resisting the urge to look back. But she didn't resist. She watched him leave, her eyes narrowing slightly, as if she were memorizing every step he took, as if she were planning her next move. That afternoon, in the engineering building's study commons, Daniel sat alone, reviewing notes for his upcoming exam. His paper on algorithmic fault detection in mechanical systems was still unfinished, and he wanted to submit something perfect. Not just for the grade, but because he truly loved the work. He barely noticed the three students approaching until one of them gently tapped his shoulder. "Hey, Daniel?" He looked up. It was Marcus, Ava, and Diego, three classmates who had never spoken to him directly before, though he'd seen them around many times. "Can we sit?" Ava asked. Daniel nodded. The three pulled out chairs and sat, all looking unusually serious. "Bro," Marcus began quietly, "Cartwright is pissed." Daniel didn't respond. He didn't need to. Marcus continued anyway. "After you left class, she went straight to the faculty office. Looked like she was ready to burn the whole building down." Ava leaned forward. "We heard she's talking to the department head." Diego added, "We're pretty sure she's trying to get you removed from her class." Daniel absorbed this without flinching. "I didn't do anything wrong," he said softly. "Exactly the problem," Ava whispered. "You proved her wrong in front of everyone. She hates that," Diego said. Marcus nodded heavily. "She's been treating us like trash all semester. But with you, it's like she's obsessed with controlling you." Daniel sighed quietly. He wasn't afraid, but he could feel the weight of something building. Something more than just a bruised ego. "Thanks for telling me," he said sincerely. The three of them exchanged looks. "Just be careful," Marcus said. "She's powerful. People don't usually push back against her." Ava added, "We've seen what happens when they do." Daniel closed his notebook slowly. "What happens?" he asked. Ava hesitated. Diego answered instead. "She doesn't yell. She doesn't confront you. She just destroys your grades, piece by piece, until you fail, and she makes sure you can't appeal it." Marcus nodded grimly. "We're talking zeros on assignments that used to be A level. Lost submissions. incorrect formats, plagiarism accusations. She knows how to make it seem like your fault. Daniel felt something stir inside him, not fear, but a tightening of determination. He had fought too hard to get here. Worked too many nights, sacrificed too much. He wasn't going to let one professor decide his future. But before he could speak, his phone buzzed. An email notification from Professor Linda Cartwright. Subject line: concern regarding your academic standing. His breath stilled for a moment. Ava leaned over. Open it. Daniel tapped the message. It was long, far too long to be normal. He read it silently while the three watched him closely. The email was filled with vague accusations. Your attitude today was concerning. Your behavior disrupted the learning environment. Your performance will need to be reevaluated. I will be monitoring your progress more closely. If issues continue, administrative action may be required. At the bottom, this is your formal warning. Professor Linda Cartwright. Daniel felt a cold wave pass through him. Not because he feared the consequences, but because the game had officially begun. Ava exhaled sharply. This is retaliation, she whispered. Classic Cartwright. Marcus shook his head. She's coming after you hard, man. Diego added, she won't stop. Daniel set his phone down gently. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't slump. He didn't tremble. He simply said, she started a war she can't win. A moment of silence followed. The three students looked at him with wide eyes. Not out of fear, but out of respect. Because for the first time, they saw something in Daniel that even Cartwright couldn't destroy. An unshakable calm, a quiet fire. A strength that didn't need to shout. Before he could say more, a shadow fell across their table. All four looked up. It was Dean Anderson, the department head. His expression was unreadable, heavy, serious. Mr. Reed, he said, I need to speak with you. Daniel stood slowly. Now. The dean nodded. Oh no. She really pulled strings. Daniel followed the dean down the hall, each step echoing through the quiet building. Because he knew exactly where they were going. The administrative office. And he knew exactly who waited there. Professor Linda Cartwright. Waiting to finish what she started. Waiting to break him. Waiting to make him regret ever standing up to her. But Daniel had no intention of backing down. He wasn't just walking into a meeting. He was walking into the eye of the storm. And he wasn't afraid of lightning. Dean Anderson's office was quiet. Too quiet. The kind of quiet that didn't belong to a university hallway at midday. The kind of quiet that warned Daniel he was walking into something carefully arranged. The dean led him inside. Daniel stepped through the doorway, and there she was. Professor Linda Cartwright. Sitting in the guest chair. Legs crossed, hands folded, back straight, cold smile curling at the corner of her mouth. Waiting for him. Daniel felt the shift instantly. This wasn't a conversation. This was an ambush. Have a seat, Daniel, the dean said calmly. Daniel sat. Posture controlled. Face unreadable. The dean took his seat behind the desk. He removed his glasses, cleaning them slowly, a habit he always had when preparing for a difficult discussion. I've received a report from Professor Cartwright, he began. Daniel didn't react. The dean continued. She stated that your behavior in class today was highly disruptive. Cartwright added quickly. He openly challenged my authority in front of the entire lecture hall. Daniel didn't look at her. He kept his eyes on the dean. With respect, he said softly. I corrected a mistake. The dean looked at Cartwright. She leaned forward slightly. You didn't simply correct it. You undermined my instruction. You embarrassed me in front of more than 100 students. Daniel finally turned his head toward her. His voice remained gentle. I wasn't trying to embarrass you. I just wanted the correct explanation to be taught. Pause. Cartwright's eyes hardened. Your tone was inappropriate. Your posture was aggressive. Your overall presence was confrontational. Pause. Daniel blinked slowly. He hadn't even raised his voice. Daniel, professors are expected to maintain control in the classroom. When students challenge that control, things can escalate. Daniel's jaw tightened just slightly. So, that was her angle. She wanted to paint him as a threat, a problem. A disruption. I didn't escalate anything, Daniel said. I spoke calmly. Cartwright cut him off. You defied my instructions twice. You walked to the board without permission. You ignored my warnings. That's not true, Daniel said. But his voice wasn't defensive. It was disappointed. Quiet. Controlled. The dean folded his hands. Daniel, I need you to understand how serious this is. Professor Cartwright has had an impeccable reputation for over 20 years. Daniel felt the words hit him like a slow punch. 20 years. 2 decades. The institution would always protect someone with that kind of tenure. Cartwright leaned back with a slow, satisfied breath. She was comfortable now. In control. Dean Anderson, she said smoothly, I am requesting that Daniel receive a formal behavioral warning. I believe he requires disciplinary oversight for the remainder of the semester. Behavioral warning? Daniel repeated softly. The dean looked at him with forced sympathy. It's a precaution, nothing permanent. Her eyes gleamed. She wanted this on his record. She wanted to clip his wings before he ever flew. Daniel felt something deep in his chest tighten. Not anger, not fear, resolve. He straightened. Dean Anderson, he said, I didn't disrespect anyone. I corrected a mathematical error. I spoke clearly. I complied. The only thing I didn't do was stay silent. The dean hesitated. Cartwright watched like a predator, waiting for her prey to stop struggling. Daniel reached into his backpack. Both the dean and Cartwright watched cautiously. He pulled out a small device, his phone. He tapped the screen and unlocked it. Before I answer any disciplinary claims, Daniel said calmly, you should listen to something. He pressed play. The room filled with audio. Crisp, clear, undeniable. It was a student's recording, not Daniel's. Someone else had sent it to him minutes earlier. Cartwright's voice echoed. Wrong. Erase it. Start again. You won't last in my class with that attitude. You think you're clever. Quiet. Her tone wasn't professional. It was personal. Personal. Manipulative. Vindictive. Then the audio caught her whisper. You won't last. The dean slowly leaned back, stunned. Cartwright froze. Color drained from her face slowly, like ink sucked from paper. Daniel, let the recording play in full. Every student murmur. Every forced correction. Every moment where Daniel remained calm while she escalated. Personal. Thorn, thick, damning, round, and swallowed. Cartwright's voice trembled. Entire lecture, Professor. The dean's eyes narrowed. Professor Cartwright, this behavior is concerning. Cartwright's voice trembled, slightly. He provoked me. He planned this. Daniel stood slowly. I didn't plan anything. I just defended myself, quietly. He turned to the dean. I don't want her punished. I don't want to fight. I just want fairness. The dean took a long breath. This changes everything. Cartwright shot up from her seat. You can't possibly be taking his side. Linda, the dean said firmly. Sit down. She froze. For the first time, he wasn't protecting her. You escalated a situation unnecessarily, he continued. You intimidated a student. You attempted retaliation. And you filed a misleading report. Her face twisted in disbelief. Daniel picked up his backpack. I think we're done here, he said gently. He turned toward the door. But before leaving, he spoke one last time, not with arrogance or anger, but with quiet truth. Professor, I wasn't trying to embarrass you. I was just trying to learn, leaving the office behind. But Cartwright didn't watch him leave this time. She was too busy watching her career tremble. Inside the office, the dean spoke quietly. Linda, we need to talk. And the door shut behind Daniel like a victory. But even as he walked away, he didn't feel triumph. He felt something else. Something darker. A feeling that told him Cartwright wasn't done. And this wasn't over. For the first time since the semester began, the air in the engineering building felt lighter as Daniel stepped out of the dean's office. Not because he'd won anything, but because he had finally put truth on the table. But truth, he knew, never stayed still. Especially not when someone as prideful and powerful as Professor Linda Cartwright was involved. He walked down the hallway slowly, processing everything that had happened. Students passing by gave him nods, supportive glances, or whispered admiration, but Daniel stayed quiet, shoulders low, breath even. He didn't celebrate victories. He only survived storms. Marcus, Ava, and Diego ran up the moment they spotted him. What happened? Ava asked anxiously. Did she try to bury you? Diego added. Did the dean believe her? Marcus demanded. Daniel simply shook his head. He heard the recording. Their eyes widened. You played it for him? Marcus asked. No, Daniel replied. Someone else recorded the entire lecture and sent it to me. I don't know who. Ava's jaw dropped. A witness? Someone in class backed you up. Daniel nodded. But he didn't say the rest aloud. Someone had his back. Someone who wasn't afraid of Cartwright. Someone who didn't want him fighting alone. Diego finally breathed out. Man, that's huge. She must be furious. Daniel didn't have to guess. He could feel her fury in the walls, like heat radiating after a lightning strike. Another notification buzzed on his phone. A message from the anonymous sender. Be careful. She won't stop here. Daniel's heart tightened. No name, no face, but the warning felt real. Marcus looked over his shoulder. You good, bro? Daniel put his phone away. Yeah, let's head to the lab. The engineering lab was usually Daniel's sanctuary. Rows of screens, drafting tables, mechanical prototypes, and a soft mechanical hum that sounded like progress. Today, though, something felt off. As Daniel walked to his workstation, several students turned their heads abruptly, whispering, murmuring, giving him careful glances, as if discussing something he wasn't meant to know. Diego noticed. Why's everyone acting weird? Ava frowned. Maybe they found out what happened. Marcus shook his head. No, this feels different. They reached Daniel's workstation and stopped. A thick envelope sat on the desk. Daniel's name written on the front. Ava whispered, that looks official. Daniel opened it. Inside, his midterm report. The one he'd submitted a week earlier. The one he'd poured hours into. The one he'd stayed up nights finishing. He flipped to the grade page. A giant red letter glared up at him. F. Ava gasped, no way. Daniel kept flipping through the pages. The margins were filled with red ink. Incorrect formatting. Poor structure. Sources unclear. Lacks understanding. Unacceptable work. Marcus grabbed the paper. This is BS. This is your best work. Period. Daniel stayed silent. A single note was attached at the back. Failure to follow professional standards. See me immediately. Prof. L. Cartwright. Snapped. She graded your engineering paper? That's not even her field. Ava's eyes widened. She must have pulled strings. She's retaliating. Daniel inhaled slowly. He didn't panic. She's saying stuff about you. Daniel didn't respond, because he already knew. He wasn't fighting one professor anymore. He was fighting a rumor, a narrative, a story she had reshaped while he was walking from one office to the next. A lie travels fast, especially when told by someone with authority. He sat down slowly, placed the failed paper on the desk, and stared at the red letters without blinking. Ava knelt beside him. Daniel, what are you going to do? He finally looked at her. I'm not letting her ruin my work, he said quietly. I'm not letting her ruin my name. And I'm definitely not letting her ruin my future. Marcus nodded. So what's the plan? Daniel stood and walked out. No explaining. Just purpose in every step. The three friends hurried after him. Where are we going? Diego asked. Daniel didn't look back. To the only person she can't manipulate. Over. The math department secretary looked up as Daniel and the trio approached. Yes? She asked politely. I need to see the dean again, Daniel said. She blinked. But you were just with him. I need to speak with him again, Daniel repeated. The secretary looked at his expression, and she didn't argue. Sit. I'll let him know. The wait was short. The door opened. The dean stepped out. Daniel, he said, what's wrong? Daniel handed him the paper. The dean scanned it. His eyebrows slowly pulled together into a frown. You didn't submit this to Cartwright, he said. Daniel shook his head. No, sir, it's for my engineering course. So how did she grade it? Daniel's voice was steady. That's what I want to know. The dean motioned him inside. Marcus, Ava, and Diego waited outside, pacing nervously. The moment the door shut, the dean spoke in a low tone. I'm beginning to think your situation is more serious than I realized. Daniel didn't respond. The dean set the paper on his desk. This, he said slowly, is academic misconduct. But not on your part, at all. For the first time today, someone in authority was seeing the full picture. Daniel took a breath. She's retaliating, he said. The dean nodded heavily. And she's escalating. A muffled knock came at the door. The secretary's voice trembled slightly. Dean Anderson, you need to come to the main office. There's a situation involving Professor Cartwright. Daniel and the dean exchanged looks. What kind of situation? The dean asked. The secretary hesitated. She's filing a harassment complaint. Daniel felt his heartbeat stop. Against whom? The dean demanded. The secretary swallowed. Against Daniel Reed. The room went silent. A cold, sharp silence that cut deeper than any accusation so far. Daniel closed his eyes for a moment. Not in fear, but in disbelief. Because the professor who tried to break him had just escalated the war to its highest level, accusing him of harassment, a claim that could destroy his entire future. The dean's jaw clenched. Daniel, we need to handle this carefully. Daniel nodded, because he knew something now. Cartwright wasn't just trying to punish him. She was trying to erase him. Erase his credibility. Erase his opportunity. Erase his place at the university. But Daniel wasn't going anywhere. Not silently. Not timidly. Not today. Not ever. He looked up slowly. "Tell me what I need to do," he said. The dean met his eyes. "We expose the truth." The hallway outside the administration wing felt heavier than the entire campus combined. Students passing by sensed the tension instantly, whispering, glancing, moving aside. Daniel walked with the dean, each step echoing like a countdown. Ava, Marcus, and Diego followed at a distance, their faces pale with worry. When they reached the office, the door to the conference room was already open. Inside sat Professor Linda Cartwright, stiff, furious, masking panic under professionalism. Two faculty administrators, confused and cautious. A university investigator, clearly summoned in a hurry. The department chair, arms crossed, jaw tight. And the moment Daniel entered, Cartwright's eyes locked onto him like a predator spotting prey. "There he is," she said coldly. "The student who has been harassing me." The dean stepped in. "Linda, enough." "We have not established." "I have emails," she snapped. "Threats. Disrespectful messages. Attempts to undermine my authority." Daniel's eyebrows lifted slightly. "Emails? Don't pretend you forgot," she hissed. "I saved all of them." The investigator opened a folder, sliding printed pages across the table. Daniel stepped forward and looked. His stomach tightened. There were emails, long ones, written angrily, disrespectfully, even threateningly. But the problem was immediate. He hadn't written any of them. Not a word. The dean skimmed the pages. "This doesn't sound like Daniel." Cartwright scoffed. "Are you suggesting I fabricated evidence?" Daniel's voice remained calm. "Yes." Every head snapped toward him. The investigator raised a cautious brow. "That's a serious accusation, Mr. Reed." Daniel nodded. "So is hers." Cartwright clenched her jaw. "I have server logs. These emails came from his student account." "And I can prove," Daniel said slowly, "that I wasn't even logged in when these were sent." The dean widened his eyes. Daniel took out his phone, tapping his screen calmly. "I use multi-factor authentication. Every login sends an alert to my phone. And it stores every timestamp." He turned the screen toward the investigator. "These emails were sent at times when I was sitting in lecture halls, in front of hundreds of witnesses." Cartwright stiffened. The investigator leaned forward. "Let me see that." He compared timestamps. His expression changed immediately. "These logins don't match your presence on campus, Professor Cartwright." The room went silent. The chair frowned. "Linda, how did you get into his student email?" Cartwright's face twitched. I didn't." Daniel spoke softly. "But someone did." He took out another piece of paper, the printed message he'd received earlier from the anonymous sender. He laid it on the table. "She won't stop here." The investigator looked at it, then back at Daniel. "Who sent this?" "I don't know," Daniel said. "But someone was warning me before this happened." The dean stepped forward. "Linda, do you deny using faculty override access to enter a student account?" Cartwright's voice rose sharply. "I have never." But she stopped abruptly, because the department chair had pulled up a screen from his laptop, a mirror of the system's access records. "Linda," he whispered, "your faculty code was used to access Daniel's account." The room froze. "This isn't a mistake." Ava gasped from the doorway. Marcus clenched his fists. Diego whispered, "Oh my God." Cartwright stood abruptly, palms slamming against the table. "He humiliated me. He challenged me. And that justifies hacking his account?" the dean asked sharply. She faltered. He's dangerous. He's manipulative." He made the class turn on me. He threatened my authority. Daniel spoke quietly. I didn't threaten your authority, Professor. His voice wasn't angry. It was almost sympathetic. You lost it yourself. Cartwright's breathing quickened. Her skin flushed red. Her composure collapsed like a cracked shell. You don't understand, she whispered. I've given 20 years to this university. I built my reputation from nothing. I can't let a student ruin it. Daniel's voice was soft. I didn't ruin anything. She shook her head frantically. You challenged me. You embarrassed me. You made me look weak. Daniel held her gaze with steady calm. You made yourself look weak. Silence. Heavy. Final. The investigator stood. Professor Cartwright, you are suspended effective immediately, pending a full investigation into academic retaliation, misconduct, unauthorized access, and falsification of evidence. Cartwright stared at him, stunned. No, this isn't how it's supposed to happen. The dean stepped forward gently. Linda, please. But she stumbled back like the ground had shifted beneath her. You don't know what this will do to me, she whispered. Daniel didn't respond, because he didn't need to. Cartwright was escorted out of the room, slowly, trembling, her once unshakable authority shattered. A lifetime of control slipping through her fingers. Her footsteps faded. The dean placed a hand on Daniel's shoulder. You handled this with more grace than most adults I know. Daniel exhaled softly. He wasn't triumphant. He wasn't proud. He was simply relieved that the truth finally had a voice louder than her lies. The chair cleared his throat. Daniel, the university owes you an apology. And more importantly, protection. The investigator nodded. We'll ensure she has no further access to your records. Daniel nodded tiredly. Thank you. As he walked out into the hallway, Ava, Marcus, and Diego rushed him. Dude, that was insane, Marcus said. Ava hugged him tightly. I can't believe she tried to frame you. Diego shook his head. She messed with the wrong guy. Daniel looked down the hall, where Cartwright had disappeared moments earlier. No, he said softly. She messed with the truth. And the truth always finds a way out. But even as Daniel breathed for the first time in hours, a small question tugged at his mind. If Cartwright accessed his account, then who else did she have helping her? And who sent him that warning message? Someone out there knew more. Someone watching from the shadows. Someone who wasn't an enemy, but not yet a friend. The sun was sinking behind the campus buildings, painting the sky in soft golds and pinks as Daniel stepped outside. For a moment, the world looked peaceful, completely unaware of the storm that had unfolded behind closed doors. Ava, Marcus, and Diego walked beside him, still buzzing with disbelief. I still can't wrap my head around it, Ava said. She hacked your account just to get you expelled, Diego muttered. Marcus clenched his fists. She almost ruined your life. Daniel didn't respond immediately. He walked slowly, each step steady, calm, and thoughtful. The air felt lighter than it had in days, but that lingering question still tugged at him. Who had warned him earlier? Who knew what Cartwright was planning before it happened? They reached the courtyard, students chatting under trees, a soft breeze rustling through leaves, the quiet hum of evening settling in. Daniel checked his phone again. No new messages, no clues, just silence. He slipped the phone back into his pocket, wishing he could thank whoever was out there. But sometimes, he knew, the truth didn't need a name. As the group crossed the courtyard, the dean called out from behind them. Daniel. Daniel turned. The dean caught up, slightly out of breath, but smiling warmly, an expression he rarely used. I wanted to tell you this personally, he said. The university has reviewed your grades and your academic record. Effective immediately, your failing mark is removed. The engineering professor confirmed your original paper was excellent. Marcus threw his hands up. Knew it. The dean continued gently. You're one of the strongest students we've seen. Don't let today make you doubt that. Daniel nodded. Thank you, sir. And, the dean added, there will be a full board hearing regarding Professor Cartwright. She won't be returning to the classroom anytime soon. Ava exhaled. Good. Diego snorted. She shouldn't come back ever. The dean nodded solemnly. What she did was wrong, but you handled yourself with dignity, Daniel. That matters. He placed a hand briefly on Daniel's shoulder before walking away. A small moment, but it meant something. Because today, truth had been louder than power. They reached the library steps where their paths usually split. Ava stopped. Daniel, go home. Rest. Today was heavy. Marcus nodded. We'll walk with you. Daniel smiled faintly. The small, quiet kind of smile he rarely gave. Thanks, but I'm okay. They didn't argue. They trusted him enough to know he meant it. The trio waved and headed off toward the parking lot. Daniel walked alone along the quiet garden path beside the library, the evening wind brushing gently across his skin. Birds chirped. Students laughed somewhere in the distance. For the first time in days, Daniel felt the world breathe calmly again. But then, his phone buzzed. A text message. Same unknown number. Good job today. Daniel stopped walking. His heart beat once, slow, controlled. He typed back, Who are you? Read receipt. Then the reply came. Someone who doesn't like bullies. Daniel stared at the screen. Another message followed. Cartwright wasn't working alone. Keep your guard up. Daniel's breath hitched slightly. Not in fear, but in realization. This wasn't over. Not yet. Why are you helping me? He typed. The reply came instantly. Because you remind me of myself. Daniel looked around. The courtyard, scanning faces, windows, shadows, searching for anyone who seemed to be watching him. But the campus looked normal. Calm, ordinary. Another message arrived. When the time comes, I'll tell you the rest. Daniel typed. Will I know when that time is? A final reply. Trust me, you'll know. The typing indicator disappeared. No more messages. Daniel stared at the phone for a long moment. Then he put it away. Because the truth had just become bigger than one professor. Much bigger. But Daniel wasn't afraid. Not anymore. He walked forward, calm as ever, the evening glow reflecting in his steady eyes. He didn't know who was out there watching his back. But he did know this. He had survived lies. He had survived retaliation. He had survived someone trying to erase him. And whatever came next, he would face it with the same quiet strength that broke Cartwright's power. Daniel Reed wasn't just a student anymore. He was a force. And the world beyond the classroom was finally starting to realize it. Thank you for watching. If this story moved you, inspired you, or made you think, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. Your support helps us create more powerful, cinematic stories every week. See you in the next episode, where another truth will rise.